Hey, welcome into what is the final edition of the First Draft podcast for this season. And before I say hello to Mel and Todd, I'm going to give them like 5 extra seconds to catch up on some sleep and say thank you to everybody who has spent time listening to us over the last handful of months, plus the people that helped make this podcast possible. Mike Voss, Matt Uffer, David Presley helped bring this podcast to life through video. Daniel Dopp, our intrepid producer, and all those involved with the audio product. It was a banner year for us. And it was a banner year again for Mel Kiper Jr. and Todd McShay. Mel, how are you doing after the draft? Have you slept more than like 6 or 7 hours per night since then?
A little less. Like Todd and I always look at that as survival. This is our kind of our Bear Grylls moment. Throw us out there and see if we can come back and still stand the day after, a couple days after the draft. And we are still standing. We're still excited. Todd's got his mock draft for next year coming out Thursday. I've already got some guys rated. I got a big board coming out in 2 weeks for next year's draft. So this one will be in the rearview mirror. We'll move on to next year pretty soon. But today we'll kind of review everything and come up with some ideas about who we think did well, some surprising, puzzling moves, and wrap up the draft. And I'll tell you what, guys, a lot of good players went undrafted, and they've already signed with respective teams. They're your 8th and 9th round picks, and some of those guys could be in camp and helping teams this year in the National Football League.
Todd, how are we hanging in?
Good. I told Kiper the story yesterday. So my parents both worked for Delta, right? Growing up, I've been flying on planes since I was like 8, 9 months old. I've never been able to sleep on a plane ever. I'm flying from Cleveland to Boston, and I get a tap on the shoulder. It's the flight attendant, and he says, "It's time to go. You got to grab your bag and go." I was seated in 1A. That was my seat, 1A. 150 people had passed by me. I slept through the whole thing. I look around and there were people with, the cleaning crew with trash bags, cleaning everything up. I was like, oof, this was embarrassing.
You're amazing.
You're lucky that plane went heading somewhere else to take you out, but to take it off.
Yeah. Could have wound up in Germany.
Oh, man. That is amazing. Well, it's certainly well earned, and the content has not stopped since the draft is over. I know Mel has done his draft grade. Todd has done his biggest question marks. You mentioned that Todd is doing his 2022 mock draft, which comes out on Thursday. Mel, you're working on your big board. The draft really is a 365-day-a-year event. But we don't want to let this draft that just went behind us pass by without taking at least one more bite at the apple to review some of the picks that were made, some of the strategies involved by teams, and maybe those that we felt like fared stronger than others. So we're going to start in reviewing this draft by starting with teams that we thought had a standout draft, knocked it out of the park. So Mel, I'll give you the first pick. What was the team that knocked this draft out of the park?
Gave 2 A's. The Miami Dolphins, I thought, had a great draft. Not only do they get players to help on both sides of the ball, they get a 2023 first-round pick from the 49ers. But, Jalen Waddle, Jalen Phillips should be impact performers, a pass rusher in Phillips and a receiver return man, punt returner in Waddle. Javon Holland, Liam Eichenberg, Hunter Long, that second tight end, Barnell Coleman, that huge bookend, underrated tackle out of UMass. They did really well. And the Chargers, I thought, lined it up. They waited for Slater to be there. He was at 13. Asante Samuel Jr., a cornerback from Florida State, one of the more underrated players, goes at 47. Then they get guys like Chris Rumph, a good pass rusher, in the 4th round. I like Brendan Hymus's potential at Nebraska. Know about the Senior Bowl practice. I went back at the tape in Nebraska. He held up very well there with the Cornhuskers. Larry Roundtree, running back in the 6th round. Nice pick there. So I gave the Chargers and the Dolphins the 2 highest grades. And the Giants, I kind of amended that. Gave them a B+. Should have given them an A. They moved down twice. They get a first-round pick next year from Chicago. They got Ojulari in the 2nd, Kadarius Toney in the 1st, added some real good players along the way. So I'd say the Dolphins, Chargers, Giants in that order for me.
Yeah, and Gettleman, go ahead.
I was going to say, who comes to mind for you?
I was just going to say quickly, Dave Gettleman, the GM of the Giants, has never traded down before. And so he kind of went against the grain and moved down twice. And I thought he had a really successful draft. I'll start with the other New York team, the Jets. I thought Joe Douglas did a tremendous job. And listen, he deconstructed the roster and got all this draft capital, over 20 picks over a 2-year span, so that he can maneuver around. He's not going to spend all 20 picks, but it's just figuring out the guys that he wants. Obviously, sitting at number 2, they love Zach Wilson, the quarterback from BYU. And then he knew that he wanted to go up and get Elijah Vera Tucker, the offensive tackle in college, who's going to kick inside the guard for the Jets to protect the quarterback. They want to do with Wilson what the previous regime never really was able to do with Sam Darnold, and that's protect him and put weapons around him. So they utilized a little bit of that draft capital to move up to, I think it was 18 overall to get Elijah Vera Tucker. 14. And then, was it 14? Okay, 14. Yeah. And then early in the second round, they sometimes lucky, you got to be lucky to be good. They get a player that Mel and I both agree, Elijah Moore, the wide receiver from Ole Miss, belonged somewhere in the first round, and he falls to the second. So now you've got your quarterback, you've got a great pass protector on the inside, you've got a weapon at wide receiver, and then in the I think it was the fourth round, they get Michael Carter, the running back from North Carolina, who can be that scat back third down guy, Mr. Versatility. And even in the sixth round, to get Hanson Nasruddin, the safety from Florida State, who's had some durability issues, but he's a big dude, 6'2" and change, 225 pounds. He can play that dime and maybe even nickel linebacker spot, strong safety. So they got a lot of good players. And the other team that I really liked when I sat down and looked at all of these, I thought Carolina, the Panthers, had a really good draft. J.C. Horn was a little bit of a surprise at 8, the cornerback out of South Carolina, but he fits their scheme. They want to be a press man team, and he's a big, physical, long press man corner. Then they got Terrace Marshall, who we knew he was going to fall a little bit because of the leg injury, but he fell all the way to, basically, in the middle of the second round. And then they get Tommy Tremble later, the fullback from Notre Dame, who's just kind of your versatile guy who can be a great blocker for Christian McCaffrey. Don't forget, Sam Darnold was a part of this whole mixture as well. And then Shi Smith, another receiver. So Terrace Marshall, the big, long, vertical receiver. Shi Smith, your slot receiver, with Darnold and the other guys that I mentioned. I thought they had a really good draft.
So the only thing with them, Field and Todd, is Brady Christensen's going to have to be that left tackle possibility. And he tested well. He had a really good career, but he was never really challenged that much in pass protection. Now you pass on Rashawn Slater. Now you got Brady Christensen. I like J.C. Horn. I think he's a heck of a pick in terms of a player, but they have to hope that left tackle they drafted in the third round out of BYU holds up. And to piggyback on the Jets, Todd, the only issue I had with them was when you move Darnold, you go with Wilson, you lose Kyle Pitts. So they could have had Darnold as their quarterback and had Kyle Pitts. And now they don't have Kyle Pitts. So basically by Wilson being your quarterback and moving with Darnold, you lost a great receiving entity in Kyle Pitts. And as I said, in a couple of years, what would you need to trade to a team that has Kyle Pitts like the Atlanta Falcons to get Kyle Pitts? What would you have to give up? So to me, that's something to watch moving forward. But the Zach Wilson,
I understand that, but we're not in the building every day. We haven't been around him, and we don't know what his psyche was like. And it was very clear that while they like Sam Darnold, but they thought it was time for him to move on and for the organization to move on. And I think both sides were really happy with how that played out. And I understand your point. I really do.
Joe basically said, as you know, I mean, you're good friends with Joe Douglas, and you know how it is, Todd. You know this better than anybody. If they'd have been picking third, he came out and said, we would have stuck with Sam. It was their love for Zach Wilson above and beyond. So if they would have been picking third and Zach goes 2, he has said, we're sticking with Sam Darnold. So it wasn't like
that's how close it was for him. But they just fell in love with Zach Wilson, and only time will tell. But there's every reason to believe, outside of some of the durability issues he's had with the shoulders and the thumb, that he's going to be a really good pro.
So I think we have to mention, or at least I'll mention, the Chicago Bears as a team whose draft, if it goes as planned, and we know that rarely does a draft go as planned, but if the players that they selected reach their apex, could be looked upon as a franchise-altering draft. It's Chicago. I always give teams credit for being honest with their timeline. Normally what I'm talking about is teams that aren't going to be very good. So rather than investing a bunch of money into assets that might not help them when they're actually hitting their stride, rather are still building things up, they look towards the future. Chicago, they needed a home run this year because Ryan Pace, their GM, and Matt Nagy, their head coach, understood the stakes of this season. If they don't win big this year, more likely than not, they're looking for a job a year from right now. And in moving up for Justin Fields and moving up for Tevin Jenkins to play left tackle, The Bears solidified 2 essential starters if these guys hit, and we got to see if they actually do hit, but I like both of the prospects. And sort of a masterstroke for Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy in this regard. Justin Fields shows a lot of promise and looks like a franchise quarterback this year. They probably stick around and earn themselves an extension. If he's not that guy immediately, the same thing happens to them that probably would have happened if they had just rolled out Andy Dalton as their starter. They're gone, right? I don't think any of us think that Andy Dalton was going to lead them to 10, 11, or 12 wins this season. So I understand the risk involved, and they paid a lot to move up from 20 to 11, but I do admire what the Bears did there to get a quarterback and a left tackle and sort of re-engage their hopes for this year, Mel.
Yeah, they made no interest, has showed no attempt, and they actually showed no interest in getting Carson Wentz, which surprised me. So you don't get Wentz, you bring in Dalton, now you get Justin Fields. It's going to be, I think all these 5 quarterbacks after the 4 after Trevor are interesting because, Zach's got all that pressure with the Jets, but Joe Douglas is trying to help him. Justin Fields is in there with Andy Dalton. Is he going to be ready to save the job of the GM and the head coach and perform? Now, he can give you that dual threat quarterback, that running threat that Andy can't as a changeup. Trey Lance can give Garoppolo that changeup if he's not ready to be the starter. So you got 2 guys, if Justin and Trey aren't the starter, and I don't think they should be opening week, then you can still work them in because they're going to give you what a Taysom Hill gives you with Drew Brees or gave them with Drew Brees. Then you look at Mac. Mac is completely different than Cam. Play calling, blocking, everything about that offense is different with Cam than it is with Mac. And you can say, well, I'd say it's going to be seamless. Look what happened with Lamar and Joe Flacco. That was late in the year number 1, and Lamar came in and gave defenses something they hadn't seen with Joe. Mac's going to come in and give them a pocket presence, a pocket passer who's not real mobile, and Cam is the mobile guy. So is that going to work? How will they adjust? How will Josh McDaniels adjust? I think watching and seeing after Trevor how these other 4 quarterbacks are planned for in terms of when they're going to get in there. Plans can go awry very quickly. How that is all handled and how it plays out is going to be really fun to watch.
A lot of quarterback action will define this draft, as we know, with 5 going in the first 15. I know none of us here likes to say that a team screwed up the draft because, as we know, sometimes the drafts that look great don't work out, and sometimes the drafts that look less promising end up being really successful. But let's talk process and picks wise. And I'll start with you, Todd. Which team maybe had the most puzzling draft this year in your estimation?
I think Denver for one reason, Field. It's because they didn't take a quarterback. And you bring in Teddy Bridgewater, and I understand that. But if you bring in Teddy, that means you're not committed to Drew Lock. So why not draft a quarterback and throw them in the mix and have them all compete? That would be the only thing. And I'll say this too, for Denver, Patrick Surtain was a great pick at 9. Javonte Williams, the running back from North Carolina, was a really good pick at 35. Quinn Miners is a good value where they got him, the offensive guard coming out of Wisconsin, Whitewater at 98 overall. They didn't draft poorly. I was just surprised because you're sitting there in the first round at 9 and you got Justin Fields and Mac Jones still on the board. And then you pick early in the second round and you have your choice of those 3 quarterbacks. And you know what? Maybe none of those 3 will ever become good starters in the league. We're talking about Kellen Mond from Texas A&M, Davis Mills from Stanford, Kyle Trask from Florida. But I was just surprised. I wouldn't say it was a bad decision, but I was surprised that they decided not to draft a quarterback.
They're a tough spot field. They have not, nothing has lined up for that team quarterback wise since they took Paxton Lynch. That affected the Josh Allen not taking. Then
I've got this list. You ready, Mel?
It's horrible.
So going back the last 5 years since they lost Peyton, it's Trevor Siemian. These are in order of the most starts from quarterbacks for Denver. Siemian, Drew Lock, Case Keenum, Joe Flacco, Paxton Lynch, Brock Osweiler, Brandon Allen, Jeff Driscoll, Philip Lindsay, and Brett Rippon. There were only 2 quarterbacks in that group that actually had winning records. Siemian was 13-11, and Brett Rippon was 1-0. I mean, everyone
against the
else
Jets a few years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's bad. And like I said, I think what Denver did was, and keep in mind, you have Mahomes, Herbert, and Carr in this division.
I know. That's the hard part.
brutal. It's brutal. And they're going to stick with Drew Lock. We hope Drew Lock can be the guy. They better hope that. Now they tried to get Stafford. They tried to get Darnold. They didn't take Fields. They didn't take Mack, as you said. And they're sticking with Bridgewater to bring in and maybe compete or mentor Drew Lock, however that's going to work out. Bottom line is, I don't care who you drafted. If you're not elite at quarterback in this league right now, you're going to have a tough time. And let's hope for them that Drew Lock can be. Now, Drew Lock, I think, last year didn't get a lot of help. Those receivers.
No, he didn't.
Better. I've been saying that.
He has talent.
Yeah, he's got a big arm.
But if you love him, you're not trying to bring in all those other guys, right?
Well, sometimes you just don't know, Todd. I think they wanted insurance if Drew wasn't the guy. Maybe that's the way they felt. I don't know, but or push him or overtake him, bring the competition in. But those receivers, I don't care who's throwing the ball. Those guys got to catch it. I mean, you can have a great quarterback. He's throwing it. Jerry Jeudy to me was a disappointment. For what was expected of Jerry Jeudy,
he had too many drops.
Key drops. And we know Hamler's always had an issue with that. They got to get Cortland Sutton back healthy. They got to get them all on the field, and they got to improve. The same thing about the Giants for Daniel Jones. Catch the damn ball when it's thrown to you. And the Giants didn't, and Denver did. And that impacted Jones. It impacted Locke. So I'm not ready to say Drew Lock can't be a really good quarterback in this league. And obviously, they believe in him strongly.
I'm not either. But, I mean, you had Justin Fields as your number 2 quarterback. He's sitting there. He's sitting there at number 9. That's why it was puzzling to me. Yeah.
Right. But see, they didn't. See, that's where, again,
of course.
A lot of people had Justin Fields as a 5th quarterback in this draft. I didn't, but some people did. Some people weren't believing in Justin Fields. We've heard it, Todd. Probably people were hating on Justin Fields, saying, what they say publicly, privately, but bottom line is a lot of people didn't like Justin Fields. Now, maybe they didn't. They didn't. So again, you look at it and say their ratings took them to Pat Surtain, who's a good player. But to me, Drew Lock is the guy now. We'll see how he plays, and those receivers better catch the ball when it's thrown to them.
Who was a team that puzzled you a little bit, Mel?
Listen to this, Todd. I had heard, we do the mock draft in the morning. Todd, congratulations. You did a great job with your 7 for 7.
That's right. 7 for 7 to start.
You're lucky 7 there. You're lucky 4, 6, 7.
Lucky 7.
Great job with that.
It might have something to do with the 400 phone calls the night before. Go ahead.
I was told Zaven Collins and Penei Sewell. Penei Sewell, I had to put a trade in. So I said, I get Penei Sewell, but you're okay. They need players. You stuck with them. I got off of and project. Then you got into, was Devontae Smith, where he's going to go Miami. That night you went Waddle, I went Smith. But then I had Zaven Collins. I was told by a really good source, Zaven Collins was going to Arizona. Now, I don't know if did you have Zaven Collins going to Arizona, Todd?
I don't know. You know my mock better than I do. I don't know.
I didn't. I didn't go into Baltimore at the end of the first
I don't think
round.
I did.
Yeah.
No, I had him going really late. I had him going in the high.
Not to Arizona.
Yeah.
And when I heard that, I'm saying Arizona. And I projected a trade with the Jets trading up to Arizona spot because I felt like they got to take a running back. So I'm not buying that. I think that's thrown out there. I think they're going to trade down and get a running back or Zaven Collins, but not take him there. So I gave him the running back with Jets going up to get Elijah Vera Tucker. To me, Zaven Collins, we say, is that kind of that chess piece, right? You can move around. They got that with Isaiah Simmons last year, right? So if you get an Isaiah Simmons last year, now you're bringing in a Zaven Collins when you need a running back. You obviously could use a guy, a receiving entity to help out. They ended up, not long after that, they drafted Rondale Moore. So to me, that was puzzling. And then New England not drafting a wide receiver until the 7th round. Instead of Cameron McGrone in the 5th, they could have had Marquez Stevenson, Frank Darby, Shai Smith, Simi Fehoko, Mike Strawn, Cornell Powell. There was receivers there. They took a linebacker from Michigan. So the fact that the Patriots didn't take a wide receiver, they got Kendrick Bourne, Nelson Aguilar, Jacoby Myers, N'Keal Harry, now Trey Nixon, who they drafted in the 7th round. A strong wide receiver draft, no receiver until the 7th, surprised me for New England.
So I'll go to my team that surprised me, and I understand that just one player is really what matters for this draft class. And he could end up being the best by far. It's Trevor Lawrence going to the Jaguars. But you look at the subsequent picks after that, and there were some that befuddled me just a little bit. First of all, Travis Etienne in the first round. I'm part of the Mel Kiper school where first-round running backs are rarely going to earn significant praise from me, especially when you have a backfield that includes James Robinson, who was phenomenal for them last year out of Illinois State, an undrafted free agent, and then you sign Carlos Hyde to be a power back to a 2-year deal this offseason. Urban Meyer conceded that the player that really wanted to pick number 25 was Kadarius Toney, who I would have understood a little bit more. But then you go down from there. this was a draft that was defined by a lot of things, but one of them includes lack of medical information. And the Jaguars went on to use relatively premium picks on Walker Little, who's played one game over the past 2 seasons because of significant injuries and opt-outs. Obviously, he plays an important position at left tackle, but there are some question marks about how ready he would be to be a left tackle anytime soon in the NFL. And then a little bit further down, they take Andre Sisco, one of the best safeties in this class, but he also missed a bunch of time last year because of a torn ACL and obviously hampered him during the pre-draft process. So I think just the idea that you're taking calculated bets on players with significant injuries, plus the first-round running back, had me a little bit more confused on Jacksonville. But again, Trevor Lawrence might be enough to make any other draft pick on their roster this year sort of a back burner thought at the very best.
And I know talking to Urban a lot leading up to the draft, certainly Tony was one of the guys on the short list, but they didn't think, and I know another team that wound up trading up didn't think that ETN would even be available in that 23, 25 range, because there were I think 2 different people that I talked to in the league had heard that Buffalo was trying to trade up from 30 maybe to go get ETN, didn't think he'd be available. So, but I understand some of the durability stuff is concerning, but those first 2 picks, plus the fact they're teammates, I think it's going to build a really good culture with 2 guys that are the highest football character that you can ask for.
Yeah, I certainly understand the character side of it and the fact that they're going to get much better right away. Like ETN is going to play a lot, even though Urban Meyer's post-draft press conference remarks were something to the effect of like, it could be a third down guy, it could be a play in space guy. I think ETN will be very, very busy. Let's turn instead to some of the best steals, our biggest steals in the draft. Mel, are there any players, maybe a couple players that come to mind to you as a steal that you just couldn't believe went where he did?
I was a little surprised Tevin Jenkins dropped to where he did, the offensive tackle from Oklahoma State. I know you say right tackle, but he had some experience at left tackle. He's going to play left tackle with the Bears. After the Bears went and took Justin Fields, they helped him out. If Tevin Jenkins can handle the left tackle spot, Charles Leno moves on, in comes Tevin Jenkins. That's a lot. You're asking an awful lot of a right tackle with limited experience at left tackle to come into the NFL and handle that spot for Andy Dalton or Justin Fields. So those first 2 picks, pressurized situations for both. But I do think Jenkins at pick 39, he could have gone 20 if the Bears would have stayed at that spot. Nobody would have really had a big argument with that pick. And then the other one was Asante Samuel Jr. We talked about Jacksonville. You mentioned Field. Their draft. Tyson Campbell is a talent. He's got length. He covers well. And Louis Riddick always talked about it. There's 3 areas of coverage. The deep pass, when he's ready to finish, he loses sight. He's not instinctive. What's he lacking? Kirby Smart couldn't coach that out of him in 3 years. Came in with the same grade as Pat Surtain coming out of high school. You're rolling a dice that all of a sudden he's going to figure that out. I don't know if you can. So I think Asante Samuel Jr., to me, to pass on him and allow him to slip down to the LA Chargers. Chargers didn't have to move for Slater, didn't have to move for Asante Samuel at 47. Love the kid, love his instincts. Everything about Asante Samuel you say pure football players in this draft, he would be in my top 10 clearly. And a guy that I think for the Chargers allowed them to garner that A grade for me.
All right, Todd, how about you for a couple of steals?
Yeah, there were 2 guys when the first night was over. I went back to my list and looked. There were in the top 25 that were still available. And it was Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, the linebacker from Notre Dame, and Trayvon Merrick, the safety from TCU. And I thought, all right, maybe they'll go 33, 34. Like they're that talented. And then I started texting GMs, and no one had usually on day 2, you can text a GM, a friend in the league, and they'll be like, there's some more medical there. There's some more character stuff there. And I didn't get anything back. Just a lot of, I'm surprised. We'll see where he goes. But Owusu-Koramoah, the linebacker from Notre Dame, goes 52nd overall to the Browns. And this is a guy who, on tape, when you study him, he's always around the ball. He can play that overhang. He can play the will linebacker spot. I mean, he is your classic hybrid who can be on the field for 3 downs. So the Browns needed a cover linebacker, and they got one in Owusu-Koramoah. And then Merrick goes 43 to the Raiders, and the Raiders need athleticism and speed, and he can be that single high safety. He'll come down and support the run. He'll do all the things, but he can really cover. I mean, he can really cover, and he's got good ball skills. So those are 2 players on the defensive side that won in round 2 that I thought, unless there's more information out there that you guys have that I don't have, or that
Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, Todd, was a medical, and that was something that we didn't talk about, but you kind of heard and you say, okay. So I don't like to you don't like to bring
I had heard it's mild though, but so I was just surprised.
Yeah, I know Adam Schefter reported today, Tuesday, maybe it was Monday at this point in time, is all relative, that there was a heart issue that was discovered late in the pre-draft process for Owusu-Koramoah. But again, it actually sounds like it's going to be manageable, but last minute, the heart, that's got to be scary for some people.
And this year was so different. Like the medical results came in about like 3-4 weeks later than they normally do. And so that's something that could have been fleshed out and they could have done like a deeper dive into had they known. But NFL teams, you get that information so late in the process. That's why this year was so stressful on decision makers in the NFL, the scouts, the general managers, because you're just kind of waiting for this information that you normally get weeks before, so you can really work through it.
And let me say this for players like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, when you have medical and you don't have the rechecks and everybody doing their due diligence and getting their doctors and getting all the things, the assurances they need, and it's up to some players in a year like this to provide things along the way. And when they don't, and when they're not things done, to get those answers and get those questions to say, put to rest, to say, okay, we're good to go. Those concerns led to some players. I mean, we were shocked that Azeez Ojulari slipped to where he did, Todd. I mean, as another one. Your Giants get him way down the line. They moved down and get Ojulari at pick 50. He could have gone 25 and nobody would have had a argument. There was a medical injury there. So, again, Terrace Marshall, we have talked about.
Terrace Marshall,
A more normal year, guys, in a normal year, I think those players may not have dropped nearly as far as they did.
Last, maybe it was month or maybe it was 3-4 weeks ago. I can't recall specifically when we did the podcast where the two of you went back and forth with 44 total picks, selecting a starting offense and a starting defense. One of the players that went relatively late in the exercise was Christian Barmore. And the refrain from both of you was, hey, there's no way he's going to be here at this point of the real draft. But at this point of our hypothetical draft, I have to take him. Well, he didn't last quite that long, but he went 38th overall to New England. And I understand, I think we all are aware of some of the, he's a young kid, some mature, he's gonna have to grow up a little bit, so to speak. A guy who is a late bloomer. To grow up, though. Yeah. You don't grow up quickly in New England. You'll be playing for somebody else pretty quickly. And fits a need for the Patriots. And I think we all believe that this was not a great defensive tackle class, but if this guy hits, I mean, he could be an immediate impact and a major impact interior defensive lineman. The Patriots trading up to 38, giving up 2 fourth-round picks, I believe it was. I thought was instructive there, Mel.
I'll tell you what, Belichick trusts Nick Saban. They work together. That's at 12 players, 13 players now that have been drafted by Bill Belichick, played for Nick Saban. First 2 picks, Mac Jones, Christian Barmore this year. So, again, the trust that Bill has in Nick. When Nick says, hey, you're good to go, he looks at it. Again, you were talking about pick 38, not pick 25 or 20. So again, I think that was a pick that certainly made sense where they were able to take him. To go back to a guy that was I thought Todd might take him, so I kind of laid it off. I know is Elijah Moore. I had him at 16 on the big board. Yeah. So he went, where was he picked? He went 16.
34.
He went to 34. So that's 18 picks later than he was rated. So for me, one of the biggest steals based on numbers. I don't know if you did your rating, looked at your ratings, who the biggest steal was.
Yeah, I had already mentioned him with the Jets, but
for just pure ranking number, it would have been Elijah Moore at 16, dropping to 34.
Yeah, tremendous value. And to Todd's point, good draft on the whole, it feels like, for the Jets, just looking at the value, the needs, and just the players that are going to make big impacts at key positions for their roster. So I wanted to get into the team that we thought had the biggest reach or made the biggest reach in the first round. And then when we were discussing it before the show, we all had the same exact answer. So Todd, I'll let you start and just sort of walk us through some of your thoughts behind the selection at pick number 17.
Yeah, and this is my least favorite thing to do because, so much time goes into this and the players are, working so hard. But Alex Leatherwood, to me, 17 overall to the Raiders. It's not about Leatherwood necessarily. It's about kind of knowing the board, right?
Right.
And it surprised me because Mike Mayock is like, he understands the board, and this is what he did for so many years. But Leatherwood to me he was a second round player. And he was the only guy that came off the board in the first 20 picks where I was like, whoa, really in the first round. Like I understood, you know, there were some guys that were rated a little lower, but Leatherwood is a tackle in college who wants to play left tackle. I'm not certain that he can hold up at left tackle. I think he's probably going to be a better fit at guard in the NFL. And so now at 17, you're taking a player who's going to wind up maybe kicking inside the guard who's not elite, you know? So it was just curious to me. Maybe the Raiders thought because you had the 2 tackles come off the board already, and then the Jets trade up for Elijah Vera-Tucker. I wonder if they thought, all right, this run is going to happen on offensive linemen, and we got to get a guy. But to me, that was the biggest reach in the first round.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Tom Cable, the offensive line coach, the kind of guy that he likes. Obviously, John Gruden always screamed at me, Mel, the phone doesn't always ring when you say I mean, I don't know how many times he slammed the phone and said his phone doesn't ring when you're telling me I should trade back. All I'd say to John is don't be greedy. How many times I say to me, don't be greedy with the pick. If you get an offer, trade down and get what you can. Alex Leatherwood has played guard. He's going to play guard, right tackle. We talked about not left tackle. He had all those penalties, 17 penalties last couple of years. There are a lot of times when I'm watching him, he's beaten, and Mac Jones got the ball out quick, and he didn't see it. It was Mac Jones and his process and get the ball out. You know, saved them from sacks and hurries. So I don't care about that number. The penalties bothered me, and the fact that the other thing too is, guys, you're talking about a team that completely revamped and restructured their whole line. Colton Miller's the last man standing. That was John's first pick ever with the Raiders before Mike came. The year before Mike got there. And Colton Miller's a really good left tackle. But now you got a situation where, and I don't like sideways moves at best. Todd mentioned, how are you helping your football team? Did you really get better? You know, by doing what you did. The numbers, when you talk about salary cap, maneuvering to allow you to get better. Are the Raiders better with Leatherwood than they were with the previous line? Is this line going to be better than the previous line? We'll see. But that's a move that obviously trading back would have been something to look at. They didn't. But like we talked about, if they'd have flipped Trayvon Merrick, the second-round pick field, you flipped the second from the first, we probably would have been sitting here not even debating it. So, again, he's going to start, and he's going to probably be a decent player. But I always say you draft to get better. Did the Raiders get better with that pick? I don't see it.
And, you know, perception really matters in a lot of ways in life. And if the Raiders had a different level of currency built up, I think the public would have trusted this, right? But this is the 3rd straight draft where they caught us all by surprise with a first-round pick. 2 years ago, Cleveland Ferrell comes out of nowhere to be the 4th overall pick in the draft. 24th would have been acceptable, but 4th was blindsiding to all of us. A year later, Damon Arnett in the first round, 18th overall, cornerback out of Ohio State. If either or both of those players had been smash hits early in his career, and there's plenty of time left, but neither one of those guys has made them look like geniuses relative to the rest of the league, then we'd all probably respond differently to this, right? But you've had back-to-back first rounds this year where a player goes much higher than expected, and you can't ignore the board. I think about players. There have been different teams that have done this, whether it's Seattle during their peak years. Remember New England, well, where'd you have Logan Mankins when he went 32nd overall out of Fresno State? I remember that being one of those picks. Everybody was like, Logan Mankins, who is this guy? Well, the Patriots had won 3 Super Bowls. Bill Belichick picking 32. Scott Pioli, these guys have a different sort of cachet about their draft slots. Whereas with the Raiders, I just think it's a little bit different given where they've been for the past few years and how the draft picks have resulted so far.
I'll give them credit for this field. Mike and John are anything but boring.
Yeah, sure. That's right. I was going to say, I made the joke, I don't know, 10 times before the draft itself. You know, I would do a mock draft or people would ask me, you know, who's going to be the biggest surprise in the first round? I'd say whoever the Raiders take, right? I mean,
where's the draft next year?
That's right.
We'll be right there to cheer it on, Todd, right?
I want John to take the podium and just do it himself and announce it. So, it was certainly an interesting decision in the first round, but we'll see. They could be vindicated in a major way if Alex Leatherwood becomes a great player.
You're vindicated when you win enough games to get into the playoffs and do some that. That's when nothing has come together. Injuries, late season, just swoons, late season, just falling apart. This team's got to put a roster together that can stay healthy and win enough games to get into the playoffs and maybe do some damage. And until that time comes, once that time comes, we're not worrying about this pick or that pick.
Sure.
When you start winning, you're not scrutinizing it the same way. They just haven't been able to get over the hump yet. A lot of it has to do with injuries, but hey, everybody's got them. They just seem to have more than anybody else, particularly on defense.
Let's get to some Twitter questions to close out the show. And Todd, I'll start with you. The first question comes from Christian, who wants to know, does Mac Jones start at any point this year for the Patriots?
I can see it. Absolutely. I don't think that's the plan week one. I really don't. I think, by backing up the Brinks, as we talked about in free agency, and spending more money than has ever been spent in free agency, that Bill Belichick has brought in enough weapons, and Cam Newton listen, I question whether he can be a great starter, but he deserves a second shot after the crazy offseason, being signed late, having COVID, and all the things that happened in New England last year, and not having a lot of weapons. So now you bring in weapons, you bring in some edge guys. I think that Cam is going to be the starter, but because of his mobility and his running and the fact that he's going to be vulnerable to injury, I think that could be an opportunity. And if it's not going well for Cam, I think Mac Jones has the football intelligence to step on the field and have some level of success as a rookie. But I really don't think that they drafted Mac Jones at 15 saying he's going to be week one, the starter for the New England Patriots.
All right, Mel, this one comes from Buffalo Ceilings, who wants to know, what did this draft teach you, if anything, about the NFL and team building in an atypical situation?
Well, as far as I was concerned, I think the second round stood out to me, guys. I think teams that were aggressive in round two, when you had a day to figure it out, day one ends, you got the whole rest of the time, and they went up, and teams went up. Denver goes up to get Javonte Williams, Christian Barmore, Tevin Jenkins. Atlanta moved down and still got Richie Grant, but Miami, Liam Eichenberg, Trayvon Merrick. Teams were aggressive in round two to go up and get guys that most of which we liked. So I thought that was important there. I felt like most of the teams in a year that was anything but normal, I gave no lower, Todd and Field, than a C+ grade. Normally I'm giving some Fs, a D-, a D, a D+, a C-, a C. Didn't give anything lower than a C+. And I thought when you looked at all these teams, I don't know if you agree, Todd, because you don't grade them, but you still look at them. Was there anybody you thought deserved a D or a C or a C-?
No, it was just a tough year. I'll say this just to kind of answer the question. It was interesting talking to so many different scouts and the level of frustration of not being able to have the one-on-one face-to-face time with players. Like the Zoom stuff is all good, but they rely so much on obviously the medical, but then just getting to know these people and knowing what the general manager wants in terms of what they're bringing into the building. And we go through this process and we get so caught up in the mock drafts and all that stuff. Like there are like 7 to 9 scouts on the road for 4 or 5 months of their life, usually, that are doing this. And they're so used to that process, and to have to sit at home and to get on a Zoom and not really get to know the players. That was to me, the biggest complaint I got from every single friend in the league was that we didn't get to know these guys this year like we normally do.
And also think it's like say New England drafting 2 kids from Alabama because of the connection with Bill. Yeah. And Nick. Yep. So you trust Nick, okay, I got boom, and then Oklahoma, Lincoln Riley, and the Oklahoma got 2 Alabama, 2 Oklahoma, then Michigan with Harbaugh. So I think trusting the coaches in college that you're friends with and are going to give you good information on.
And how many pairs too? Like Jamar Chase going to Joe Burrow. Sure. So Joe's pounding the table for Chase. You got Jalen Waddle, the receiver, going with Tua Tagovailoa. So I think there was more trust put in some of the existing players that had been in the locker room with these guys than you normally would have in a given year.
And you knew that Urban Meyer was doubling up with Clemson. He got Trevor, the guy who's security blanket, and Travis, who's also a receiver and big time receiving entity. And he also got an Ohio State player, Luke Farrell. So you knew he was going to draft an Ohio State player. And then, of course, Florida connection with Jordan Smith, the UAB pick late. So, yeah, right. I think connections and knowledge of players via the coaches in college football probably helped a lot of these teams.
All right, Todd, this one comes from Kaden Yoss, who wants to know, who was the small school prospect you were genuinely happy to see drafted?
Well, there are no Richmond Spiders. That was a disappointment. But Dylan Raduns, the offensive lineman from North Dakota State, everyone, talked about Trey Lance, the same program, and he was the number 3 overall pick. But Raduns, just watching tape of him and the way he plays, how physical he was, to see him come off the board in the second round, I just liked the guy on tape.
How about you, Mel?
Yeah, I think Mike Strawn, the wide receiver, 6'5", 225 from Charleston, certainly put up the numbers. He's got tremendous talent and size. 7th round for the Colts. We'll see how he can do. And then Rams got a couple guys. Robert Rochelle, liked him at Central Arkansas. He's added weight. Yep. He became a guy, even Trey Lance. Trey Lance didn't even go after him in that Central Arkansas North Dakota State game. And then they also got Chris Garrett from Concordia, a pass rusher late. So I thought some guys like that, certainly you root for, and you hope that they can settle in and get that opportunity. And I'm really happy for a kid. I said this on draft day, Todd, in Philadelphia, as far as perseverance, a kid who had some injuries at Damascus High School, Maryland Terrapin, Jake Funk. And I know, Todd, you like Jake Funk at Maryland, running back who's got guts and determination, battle.
Mel likes the funk.
Well, I love the funk. And Mike Locksley is one of the favorite players he's ever coached is Jake Funk. Rooting for Jake Funk to try to stick on that Rams team. If he doesn't there, he'll make it somewhere.
Practice squad, perhaps, at the very least, for Mike Funk. Next one comes from Soup de Loop, Alex Campbell. And I'll start with you, Mel. Does this draft make the Miami Dolphins Super Bowl contenders?
It makes them a heck of a much better team. I'll tell you that. A lot better team than they were. And that's again, building a roster that improves and building a roster that can get to a Super Bowl. So why you go through all this. I wouldn't sit here, Todd, if we were an organization, you and I, and it would be a lot of battles taking place. We would have one. I think we'd build a pretty good football team. But
I'd like to think so.
We would be sitting there saying, what are we doing to try to get to a Super Bowl? How are we going to construct this team? That's what it's all about. For Miami to fill needs and set themselves up with a 2023 first. And I said all along, opt-outs should not be penalized. And I know it's hard not to, but these were decisions made from a medical standpoint, business standpoint. The year was so interrupted and so crazy that and so tragic that these players, and some didn't even play to their potential because of that. We saw that with Rashad Bateman, great pick for the Baltimore Ravens. But to get a Javon Holland in the second round, to me, a guy who could have been a first rounder, definitely had he played. Then get
I think they got 5 starters in the first 3 rounds.
They got
Jalen Waddle, Jalen Phillips, the defensive end. Holland, you just mentioned at safety. Liam Eichenberg is going to be a starter at tackle, worst case guard, and Hunter Long at the tight end position from BC.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a great division. Think about it. Buffalo with Josh is already set because they got a superstar quarterback, and they got a GM that helps the quarterback and builds a roster along with their head coach, Sean McDermott. But also the Jets now with Zach and then Tua, and certainly New England now with Cam and Mac, and getting Dante Hightower back, who opted out because he's the centerpiece of their defense. They are going to be a team to watch.
It's going to be a really competitive division. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait to see how the AFC East quarterback race stacks up. Obviously, Josh Allen is the guy in that division, but those other 3 teams with major investments at the quarterback spot. I will end on this one, and just for a little bit of fun. This one comes from, for the love of God. Mel, you're slipping. No mock 2022 draft out already?
Well, it's not out until usually after Todd. I always give Todd the respect he deserves, and it comes out with his first round.
Yeah, that's why you do it.
I don't do a first round mock for next year, Todd. That's a tradition with us. He doesn't like to do draft grades. Okay, so I'm forced to do draft grades.
Here's the backstory. I'll peel the curtain back a little. I was told 15 years ago, basically as part of my contract, you can either do draft grades or a mock draft. And I said, how about neither? And then I got the look like, well, you're probably not going to get a contract then. So I decided to go with the mock draft. I don't know which is the worst of the 2 evils. I don't like either at all, but if you got to do it, you got to do it. And I got some names for you. You ready? Derek Stingley, corner LSU. Sam Howell, quarterback from North Carolina. Kayvon Thibodeau from Oregon. Spencer Rattler, the quarterback from Oklahoma. So those are 4 guys you can expect to see in the top 10, very likely.
Well, yeah, you better come up more than that because you got a 30.
I need this podcast to end so I can go do it because it's due at the end of the day.
Yeah, I got 75 names, Todd, of guys you can choose from some of my 75. But I'm gonna have a top 25 big board, top 10 positional rankings coming out in a couple weeks on ESPN.com. Thursday, Todd's got his mock 1.0 for 2022 coming out, and a couple other names, by the way. You mentioned Rattler. You think about it, Evan Neal, Alabama, right tackle, moving to left tackle to replace Alex Leatherwood. Darian Kennard, right tackle, Kentucky, moving to left tackle to replace Landon Young. great all-around linebacker Christian Harris at Alabama, good pass rusher at Oklahoma.
Here we go.
Bonito. I'm not getting all the way. I'm anxious to see who you come up with, Todd.
I can't wait to read that mock. That'll be I'm sure, Todd, you're just thrilled about that assignment. Well, that's all we have for today's show and for this season of the First Draft Podcast. And I just want to take 30 seconds to thank both of you for being so kind and gracious and allowing me to be a part of this podcast. I say it all the time, but what stands out to me amongst everything that you guys do is your passion for the NFL draft. It is unmatched. It is unparalleled. And the insight that you guys have on day 3, when we're talking about guys who didn't even start at like Division III schools, and you've got their high school stats and their scouting report, and you know their cousin's first name. It's simply unbelievable. Thank you to both of you for an incredible season. And it was a great, great honor to be a small part of this show.
Appreciate you, Field.
Appreciate it, Field. Great job. And for David Presley.
Yeah, you were awesome this year.
All the guys behind it that make this thing happen. Thank you to them. They put an enormous amount of work and preparation to make this easy for all of us. So for Daniel and David, great job. Everybody behind the scenes I didn't even mention. We appreciate everything you do. This was a fun year all the way around to try to make this thing what it really, I think on a week-to-week basis. We're gonna. I think, Field. If I didn't get the
we'll
memo
catch up
correct,
at some point. Yeah,
we're gonna start doing this pretty early and roll all the way through the entire year. So not just draft time. Draft time is basically 10 months. It goes, my opinion, it goes August 1st until June 1st. Yep. And June and July, we'll take a little break.
Yeah, don't call me in July, but after that, we're good.
Don't call me. You know what I'm going to be doing? I'm going to be watching players because I do that work in June and July to get a head start on the season while Todd's vacationing during the weekends during college football, walking the sidelines, having a good old time, drinking hot dogs, so waving to all his supporters in the stands are saying, Todd, 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 which he hates hearing, but they do it. While he's doing all that, I'm here back at the compound grinding away.
Yeah. I want one last thank you to that chair for holding up for about 12 straight weeks of you rocking back and forth. That chair is exhausted. Give it a little rest.
Let me just tell you real quick before we go. There's a chair back here that I had to move out. It was a lazy boy. I broke it about a month ago. So I had to move another chair in. I called. They can't get me a chair for X amount of months. But this chair is not a rocker. So I was waiting for, seriously, Todd, this back was starting to get Tim's back there. I can't let it was starting to get a little loose. Okay? It's because me pushing, it's not a rocker, and I'm making it into a rocker. And a smart thing to do. So this is getting a little shaky, but
oh man, you guys,
keep it between us.
This is what I'm going to miss most. Not the prospect talk, but the talk about everything else that goes on between, before, and behind the scenes. Guys, thank you so much. Everybody involved. The boss is here.
Oh, I'm in trouble.
Mel's in big trouble. If Mel doesn't appear in the Dara Mel show for a couple months.
My goodness. I didn't whisper quiet enough.
If we never hear from Mel Kiper Jr. again, now we know the reason why. All right. Well, thank you, everybody who listened. Thank you, everybody who was a part of this show. We cannot wait to be back. And trust us, you'll hear from us sooner than later. We look forward to talking to you guys again down the line.